One of my favorite things that I get to do as a minister is to welcome newcomers to our congregation and to our faith, to hear their stories, often their journey of what brought them to walk through our door or to sign on to our Zoom link when they have so many choices out there on Sunday morning, and to engage their questions about faith and Unitarian Universalism. And of course, people seek us out for all kinds of reasons, but I'd say one of the biggest is that folks say they are seeking a community to feel connected and known, but also a community that seeks to expand outward in ever widening circles in acts of service and justice, not one that only turns inward and is concerned only for itself. Now, often folks also come to us with a question as they are kind of checking us out. And I think that that question is in some form, are you really as inclusive as you say you are? Sometimes this question actually gets asked explicitly, and more often it is sort of an implicit question as folks engage in community with us. Now, as part of our newcomer gatherings, we talk about the fact that Unitarian Universalism is not a creedal faith. It is a covenantal faith. Right relationship with other human beings and with the planet itself in this life is important, not right belief to get to the rewards of the next life. That is at the core of how we practice our faith, to be in right relationship with one another. And for some folks, especially those among us, whether you're a newcomer or not, if you've come out of more orthodox traditions, this can be both a relief and a little hard to grasp. There is a freedom from dogma here, yes, that is true, but there is also a really high expectation. Rather than asking people to sign on to a particular statement of unchanging belief, we are asking people to commit to a way of being and loving each other in community that, and this is the hard part, both accepts each other as we are, that kind of unconditional love that Hannah was just singing about, and actually expects that we will change each other and be changed by each other, that we must be transformed ourselves if we are to be a part of transforming society towards more justice and equity and compassion. Now, if you read our congregational covenant or read the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, you will not see the term beloved community anywhere. But I believe that the term beloved community became popularized by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a core part of his philosophy of nonviolence. In fact, he said that the whole goal of nonviolence, his philosophy of nonviolence, was to create the beloved community. And so we hear this phrase, beloved community, a lot, especially around MLK Day and during the month of February, which in this country is Black History Month. But it is very easy, I think, without a deeper dive, to think of beloved community as just a place where everyone is kind to one another and everybody gets along, a kind of warm and fuzzy place to rest. But this is not the kind of community that Dr. King was talking about. His use of the phrase beloved community rested partly on the work of a philosopher named Josiah Royce, who lived in the second half of the 19th century and just a little bit into the beginning of the 20th century. He is known as the founder of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, among many other accomplishments in his life. Both Royce and then King recognized the individuality of persons and how important that is, but also saw that individuals are always operating as a part of a greater whole, an ecosystem of relationships. And for Royce, beloved community was a goal to be sought through loyalty. Loyalty is the word he used. And he described that loyalty as, quote, the practically devoted love of an individual for a community. So where Royce talked about loyalty, Dr. King, being a theologian, talked more about agape, that Greek word that denotes a very particular kind of love. Dr. King wrote this: agape is more than romantic love. Agape is more than friendship. Agape is understanding, creative, redemptive, goodwill to all men. He said to all men, we can say to all people. It is an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. He wrote, theologians would say that it is the love of God operating in the human heart. So that when a person rises to love on this level, he loves men not because he likes them, not because their ways appeal to him, but he loves every man because God loves him. Those are Dr. King's words. He also wrote, agape is not a weak, passive love. It is love in action. Agape is love. It is insistence on community even when one seeks to break it. Insistence on community even when someone is seeking to break that community. The bottom line is that beloved is not created when like-minded people gather and love one another because everyone is already so great and everyone gets along so swimmingly. We get closer to beloved community when we put a powerful love into action, even in the midst of forces seeking to divide and separate us, forces that would seek to break the bonds of community. And so today, while over the last few years, we have talked a lot about the forces out there in the world that are seeking and that do oppress different identities. Today, I want us to think more about the forces that seek to divide and separate us, not just out there, but in here too. In here, in us as individuals, and in here, in us as a congregation, in the way we operate as a community. So let's go back to that wisdom story for a moment. And I want to give credit to Reverend Karen Johnston for the idea for that story, and to Johanna for working with me on it. I was the person in the story just trying to do my thing, oblivious to the fact that I had this glaring flaw. I had this stuck to my face, but I couldn't see it. And when anyone pointed it out to me, I immediately either argued and denied it. I got defensive and said, I'm going to break off relationship with you. Or I got so embarrassed I wanted to hide. until finally I was able to say, oh, wow, I do have something on my face, don't I? Thank you for telling me. Yes, I'd like your help with that. Someone held a mirror up to me, and without condemning me or casting me out, said, here, I want you to know this. It's important for you to know this, and I want to help you with it. So we all, every single one of us, have the equivalent of something like that smear of tomato paste on my face. A way we are that we just can't see ourselves, and it takes others to help us to know it and to deal with it. The thing is, some of these ways are fairly innocuous. Having a smear of tomato paste on my face is fairly innocuous, but some of these ways actually harm other people and break the bonds of community. And I want to invite us to think about the fact that whatever identities we carry that put us in a position of relative privilege and power, whether that's gender or sexual orientation or class or race, education level, if we are in that category, if we are in a position of relatively more privilege and power, we've probably got some stuff on our face that we're not aware of. If you are a white identified person like me, we've got a lot of stuff on our face that we can't see. I want to give you a personal example from my own life. A few years ago, I was watching a documentary film about James Baldwin, the African-American writer and social critic. And during the film, I was sitting next to an African-American colleague of mine. At one point in the film, there's footage of Baldwin in his famous 1965 debate with William F. Buckley at Cambridge University. This is like a formal debate, right? And as far as I could tell, it was like in front of an all-white room of people. They were debating racial justice in America, by the way. I turned to my colleague and said, can you imagine? And I was thinking about, in my own head, the courage it took him. What a hard room to be in. I was having this feeling of awe and admiration. And my colleague just turned to me and just said directly, I don't have to imagine it. This is my everyday experience. Now, she could have said nothing to me or just politely nodded her head at me and written me off, perhaps. But instead, she shared her truth, the truth of her experience. And in so doing, she held up a mirror to me so that I could see how I was assuming that my experience was someone else's experience. I would say, I don't know that she would use this word, but I would say that she loved me in that moment. She loved me enough to share the truth of her experience, even though it kind of made me uncomfortable. Even though I kind of, for a moment, felt ashamed that I had said that to her. So in the United States, we are raised in and we live in a white supremacist culture. As white folks, we cannot avoid at times acting or speaking in ways that embody white supremacy. And I want you to hear me on this. I'm not talking about neo-Nazis here. We can use that term white supremacy culture in a couple of different ways. talking about the culture that breeds the assumption that our experience of the world is the norm against which everything else gets measured. Here's a definition of white supremacy culture for you from Sharon Martinez. White supremacy culture is the idea or the ideology that white people and the ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions of white people are superior to people of color and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions. She goes on to say, white supremacy culture is reproduced by all the institutions of our society. Now, here's the thing. For those of us in this virtual room who are white identified people, which is not all of us, we do not have to believe in ourselves that whiteness is superior to reproduce that idea. White supremacy culture is embedded in and reproduced in all the institutions of our society, including our congregation, including our wider Unitarian Universalist Association. Now, the past few years, the Unitarian Universalist Association has undertaken some deep institutional examination and challenge to itself around how white supremacy culture operates in our congregations and in our faith at large. In 2017, after a couple of very public, racially charged events within the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Commission on Institutional Change was formed, and it has spent 3 years in deep examination, kind of a process, really a process of asking people within and beyond our faith to hold up a mirror to us. What are we not seeing about ourselves? And asking especially people of color within our congregations and other folks who hold marginalized identities to hold up a mirror to us. What are we not seeing about ourselves? In 2020, the Commission published its report after 3 years of work. It's called Widening the Circle of Concern. I have a copy right here. It's a pretty big report. All of it is actually available for free on the Unitarian Universalist Association website. They really likened this process to a truth and reconciliation process, and it's certainly not over. One of the questions that the Commission asks us to consider is, what choices will we make or fail to make that will affect the relevancy and survival of our faith in these times that we live in? So there's no way I'm going to try to summarize this whole report today for you, but I do want to highlight a couple of recommendations for us here in our congregation in Blount County to be thinking about. One of the things that the report says really clearly, and I'm going to quote it, covenant and commitment, not comfort, should be the binding fabric of Unitarian Universalist congregations. It goes on to say, our covenant holds us to hold urgent and dear Unitarian Universalism's aspirations to building the beloved community with diversity, inclusion, equity, compassionate justice, and an acknowledgement of our interdependence with other forms of life. We have bound ourselves together in faithful discernment, not just by structure, in our learning and living with one another. Our common ministry must lead us forward toward transformation and liberation. We are called to travel this path together because together we are more. So what does that what does that mean for us here in Blount County? What do we do as a congregation here next as we travel this path towards beloved community together? Well, here are a couple of things I want to propose to you all. We need to continue to learn about and practice what covenantal relationship actually means, how to stay in uncomfortable places with each other without either reverting to politeness to smooth things over when someone points out that maybe there's something on our face, or disengaging because it's too hard to kind of struggle through a place of discomfort and get to the other side. And I want to let you all know at the end of this month, February 27th, which is a Saturday, the Unitarian Universalist Association is inviting people from congregations all over the country to join in conversation about that in an online setting. It's called the New Day Rising Conference, and information was in your newsletter about it this week. That will stay in there. If you think you might be interested in attending and finding out more, let me know or let a member of the board know. So that's one concrete next step. I think we also need to continue, and this is one way to do it, continue to prioritize those kinds of learning opportunities for ourselves that help us see how racist systems and structures are not just out there, but they're also right here. And finally, I think we need to continue. These are all growing places where we've already done some work, but we can grow even more. We need to continue to prioritize in our ministry, in the broader community, real partnership and relationship with organizations that put the experiences and the health of people of color and other marginalized identities at the center. Now, how can we deepen even further our relationships with Blount County United and the Blount County NAACP, with other institutions and organizations and faith communities in the Black community in Blount County, with the immigrant community here? These are conversations that the board is helping to undertake right now as we think about how we use our resources in these times in focused partnerships. And then finally, it might be time to adopt even more explicit language as part of who we say we are. In fact, there's a whole movement within Unitarian Universalism that is asking congregations to add an 8th principle. You all are familiar that we have 7, right? But this movement is advocating that as a whole association, we adopt an 8th principle. And here's how that 8th principle reads as it has been proposed. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. If we seek to be a beloved community, then we've got to practice that agape love that King talked about, that kind of love that encourages us to hold up mirrors to one another, the kind of love that demands that we seek and always strive to know better so that we can do better with and for each other. What do I have on my face that I can't see? And can you help me with that? And when we say love is the spirit of this fellowship, I hope it is this kind of fierce love we are talking about. Not just love that comforts, but love that also challenges. Reverend Victoria Safford has said that the goal of beloved community is reconciliation, not to destroy your opponent nor cast them out, but to stay in the struggle till love wins. So maybe we ought to add that to our congregational covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its blessing, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, to help one another, and to stay in the struggle until love wins. May we be ones to make it so. Amen.